Meeple Nation Podcast Episode 418, Tiny Epic Dungeons.
Welcome, citizens of Meeple Nation. For the next 30 minutes, sit back and enjoy.
Meeple Nation Podcast is sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com. Go to their website, check out their amazing product. I know I say it's an amazing product each week, but it truly is amazing. You can take any table that you're playing on and make that table amazing. Did I mention that they're amazing?
Amazing.
I have my new mats, Andy has his new mats. Guess what? They look amazing. We both got the pirate map and the Cthulhu mat. When we were looking on the website, I really liked the Cthulhu map and was really excited about that, and I still really think it's an awesome mat, but that pirate one? I think that pirate one's my favorite.
It's definitely my favorite. It is a beautiful mat.
The Cthulhu map?
Mat.
It's a map. It guides you to the Almighty
Good heavens, you
Lord.
two. It ends in a T.
It is a lot more vibrant and colorful than I would have expected a Cthulhu map.
It is very much, and it makes me really want to order the Great Wall one.
Yeah, our friend Doug ordered that. Definitely anxious to take a look at it, because it was very colorful, just looking at it on Kickstarter.
Yeah, the only issue I had with it wasn't available for my Watson with the extension leaves, which is why I kind of limited myself to the pirate map and the the pirate mat.
Wait.
Because I still almost said map.
Was that MAPT?
The pirate map. I can't even remember what I was saying at this point. But I really like the pirate map.
Good job.
Did I say
you
it right?
Did it.
I thought he did, and I thought he screwed it up again.
Of the two, it is my more favorite. I can get that to fit on my extension leaf. I can get worst.
Until
Dave?
next time, we will see you.
But I can get that with my extended table for the Watson. I like it. But the Cthulhu one, also pretty dang cool. I'm still waiting for my dining leaves to come. So maybe I need to go back and order some more mats so that those dining leaves aren't lonely when they come.
Maybe you can find a map to your dining leaves.
Anyways.
No comment.
Check out GameToppersLLC.com. Their stuff's amazing.
And after you go to GameToppersLLC.com, jump over to MeepleNation.com. There on our website, you can check out the blogs that we've got. At this point, we've got lots and lots of them you can go through. You can read the latest blog, or you can search back for a topic that you're interested in. We've been doing weekly blogs for quite a while now. You can also look at photos. You can look at links to episodes and our bios. You can email us at meeplenation@gmail.com. We also would love to have your support on Patreon. Also, want to really thank all of you who have supported us on Patreon. We really, really, really appreciate it. If you are familiar with that, or if you're not, go to meeplenation.com and check it out.
We're the hosts of Meeple Nation. I'm Logan Howard.
I am Andy Holiday.
I'm Nathan Howard.
And I'm Dave Holiday.
And this week, we are talking about TED.
Ted, we're doing a TED Talk?
Kind of. It's probably better than a TED Talk.
I don't know. I've heard some pretty amazing TED
I've
Talks.
heard some awesome TEDs,
But-
yeah.
I've also heard some that I was like, that was a TED Talk?
But did it compare to playing Tiny Epic Dungeons?
Tiny Epic Dungeons lasted longer.
That's a good and bad thing sometimes.
It is sometimes. I thought Tiny Epic Dungeons was great. Of the Tiny Epic games that I've played, which is most of them, I really like Tiny Epic Dungeon.
Tiny Epic Dungeons is a fully cooperative dungeon crawler. I do want to say, though, that Tiny Epic, just as a whole, what is it, a brand?
Model, maybe?
Series?
It's one of those that I see online all the time, board game groups. I am so done with Tiny Epic whatever. And then they're like, oh yeah? I'm going to call your bluff. New Kickstarter right now. They're like, okay, here's my money. They do a great job with these games. That's what's really fantastic about it, is that it's a small box, but has big delivery.
Absolutely. I've only played 3 or 4 of the Tiny Epic games, but all of the ones that I've played, I think they've done an amazing job, especially considering the size. Look at this little box. For me in particular, especially being somebody that loves components and loves the visual aspect of a big game, these tiny boxes, you pop them open, and I'm generally a little hesitant, but then I've played them and I've really, really enjoyed them.
And it is amazing how broad the variety of games that they have for the Tiny Epic series. I mean, go from a game like Tiny Epic Tactics that has an area control element to it to something like Tiny Epic Dungeons with a dungeon crawler. There's the exploration aspect to it where you're trying to discover the dungeon. You have to discover almost the entire dungeon in order to win the game.
Not a lot of time.
Yeah, there is an in-game timer involved with it, and it can get down to the wire. In fact, friend Doug played it in his gaming group as well, and they said it came down to their last roll, whether they won or not. And then Nathan, you and I and Corey played it, and we lost our first game.
We were pretty close, too. I mean, it would have taken one more turn, and we would have been victorious.
Yeah. And then we were lucky enough to win in our second playthrough with Logan and Doug. And
Secret weapon. Nice job, Logan.
The secret weapon, Logan. He actually was one of the secret weapons. Both he and Doug did extremely well, and I did mediocre, just like I did in the previous play.
It's the dice.
It may be the dice. Ding D6s.
Bring up the difference between the two. And Tiny Epic Tactics I haven't played, nor have I played Tiny Epic Dinosaur. Those are the two that I haven't played. But they're completely different. I mean, you look at Dungeon Tactics and going to Tiny Epic Mechs, which is drastically different. Scott Alms, who's the designer of all these, has done just a superb job providing variety in each of these games. And like you mentioned, Dave, packing so much into that small little box you don't think is going to be a great game. Logan, like you mentioned at the first, people are saying, oh, I'm tired of Tiny Epic games, but if they weren't awesome, people wouldn't be buying them. Each of their Kickstarters has been overwhelmingly successful. So there are a lot of people who follow and enjoy Tiny Epic games. I would consider myself one of those fans. Even though I haven't played Dinosaur or Tactics, I have enjoyed a lot of the other ones. And Tiny Epic Galaxies is probably one of my favorites of the series.
But that makes it so much easier for you to approach Tiny Epic Dinosaurs. You haven't played the game, but you're like, well, I've enjoyed the series thus far, so I can't imagine it's going to be a terrible game.
Right, yeah, I have a lot of faith in it. It's just a game that I haven't gotten to playing. We have that issue of too many games, not enough time. Kind of unique to us, maybe, but...
No, I don't think it is. I think that's everybody.
To a point, I think you're absolutely right. Everybody would love to play more games, but sometimes it's all that coordinating of getting people to show up to game night on time.
The adulting.
You bring up a good point about Scott Allman. You look at a bunch of other game designers, a lot of their games are very similar. Oh yeah, this has the feel of this particular designer. Worker placement game has a lot of the same feel, maybe a previous game that they've developed and designed. These are all over the place. It is really remarkable how well he's done at designing so many different games.
Caliber of his designing abilities is, you're spot on, that it is just, there are some similarities in some of the games, but for the most part, each of these games is pretty diverse from the other. So we're all over the place. Let's get back to delving deep into Tiny Epic Dungeons.
No. We need to dive into our TED Talk. Tiny Epic Dungeon Talk.
In Tiny Epic Dungeons, players control a band of heroes exploring the treacherous dungeon in search of the fearsome dungeon boss. Heroes make their way through the dungeon one room at a time. Around every corner, goblins and ferocious minions seek to block the hero's path. Where there isn't an enemy, traps are set, ready to spring on even the most prepared hero.
That's something that appeals to us. When I showed up at game night the other night, there was a whole selection of heroes that I could have chose from to play this Tiny Epic Dungeons. Because I'm an impulsive person, I just picked, and they're like, well, I'm kind of this person, you should pick somebody else. Okay, the person next to him. But there was a huge selection. They all have different powers, they all have different roles. I think the replayability just from that is great.
Not only that, the dungeon is modular. Each room is a card that you're going to flip over. You start in the center of the board, and it's a 7x7 grid that you're going to be playing on. You have your starting room that you're in, and then you will put a face-down card at each doorway. When you enter a room, you flip that card. If there's a goblin there, then you're going to spawn a goblin, and you're going to take a point of damage. If there's a minion there, you spawn a minion. You'll draw the top minion card or the goblin card, depending on what creature gets spawned. If it's a minion, you take 2 damage. And now there's a minion there that stops your movement. You have to stop in that room, and you still get an action. You can still attack. For the most part, what you're going to have to do, because you can't interact with the room at all until either the heroes outnumber the monsters in that particular room, or there are no monsters in that room. One thing you do when you flip that card is you put more face down cards at every open doorway. And you get to orient those cards any way you want. One of the ways you can lose is if you orient the cards in a way that you can't find the boss's lair because you've basically trapped yourselves. You don't have any open doorways because you have to find the boss's lair, and it's in the bottom 5 cards of the deck because you have to defeat the boss to win. So you don't want to close yourself off or you're going to lose the game. Logan, you mentioned a timer. So there's a torch track. At the end of every player's turn, that torch moves closer and closer to the skull at the end of the track. Each space could potentially have an effect. Either a goblin is going to spawn or all monsters are going to activate, which means that they'll either move or attack, or certain ones will move and attack. Honestly, the game can get kind of brutal, especially if you're getting overwhelmed with goblins and minions. The minion cards, they typically come out in the middle of the game. You have to find each of the minions. There's going to be a minion for each player, and those minions hold a key. When you defeat a minion, you get to put the little heart token that you use to measure their health. You put that on the back side of the boss card. Once you get all the minions defeated, you have all the keys to open the lair, and you just have to find the lair to enter.
I think equipment is kind of where this game shines. At least it did for me when I played.
For sure, yeah.
I do like that they have several sets of equipment that match the 3 types of roles: a ranged person, a melee person, and a magic user. Each of those armor, the weapons, can be used by anybody. However, they are more appropriate if they're used with specific type of character. Time that we played, Andy, I was the barbarian, so I was kind of the tank or the damage dealer. The armor that I was getting would have been more appropriate for somebody who could do more damage. But there was another set of armor, the lion armor, that would have been more appropriate for me because of the amount of damage that I kept taking. And I kept running into the issue of getting knocked out. And then you would take that turn to recover, find the end boss, do an attack. He would attack me, I'd get knocked out. 2 turns later, I could attack again. For us in our game, we just ran out of time. Kept running into the issue with both you and I kept getting knocked out.
And that was not necessarily unique to our play. 3 of us, Logan, you, me, and Doug, very similar. We were getting knocked out a lot at the end. Not as difficult at the beginning. You're only fighting goblins and not taking a ton of damage.
And the middle, the minions kicked our trash.
Yeah,
too.
once those minions start coming out, they really pack a punch. They do a fair bit of damage. Honestly, the second playthrough, the minions, I think, did more damage than the actual boss did. The boss would take away our focus and take away our health, both, but it wasn't a ton. But those minions, they hit hard.
They do, especially the end boss. When we were fighting the dragon,
Yeah, the dragon definitely hit hard. We didn't fight the dragon. We fought a different
it was
boss.
a spider queen or something. She did not hit nearly as hard as some of the minions.
One thing that's interesting, and we really didn't get a chance in either of our plays to see this and how it worked. As you're searching through the dungeon, you're going to find these. There are altar rooms, and you'll put an altar token as you're discovering those rooms on the actual room. And different bosses will have, so they have a ton of health. Potentially, most of them will have a rune token or more. The largest one I saw had 3 rune tokens on it. You can damage that boss down to the rune token. That token will not move any further until you get a rune put on them. So you have to actually lure the boss out of their lair to each of the altars to get that rune token taken off of the altar card and put on the boss card. Once that happens, then you now reduce their health. Because of that, we didn't get to really take advantage of the benefits and or penalties that happen in the actual lair. There are spots to stand that you're basically moving through the lair because it's considered one large room, but there's spots that you can stand on. The further away you get from the entrance to the lair, the bigger your penalty is. The closer you get to the entrance to the lair where you actually came in, you actually get penalized for it. You obviously want to get further in to get those bonuses and have an easier chance to defeat the boss. That being said, you almost always have to lure the boss out of the lair as well to get those altar tokens put on that particular boss card so you can actually defeat them.
So, Andy, you mentioned earlier exploration of the dungeon, that you have to explore the dungeon. How does that work in this game?
So you have movement. Each character will have a movement value that they can spend on their turn. You spend 1 move to move into a room that's face down. You flip that card over, orient it however you want to orient it. Put cards around it to match the doorways. Wherever there's a doorway, you put a new face-down card next to it. If there's a monster, that monster spawns. If there's not a monster, there's typically something to interact with in that room. Sometimes there's a trap. If there's a trap, you always have to make a check. Just as soon as you go into that room, and each time you go into that room, if the trap has not been disarmed, you have to make that check.
It makes it very vital to disarm the trap.
Yeah.
Because chances are you're going to be going through that room more than once, if not multiple times. Andy, the game that we were playing in with Corey, ran into the room with the swinging cudgel or whatever you would call it a number of times. And I tried to disarm it. Took twice, and then I just had to move on. And then you came and did it on your first try. Had to
What?
show off.
I
With
know.
those dice?
I know, amazing, right?
The trap element is done really well. Provides a free room where there's not goblins showing up, because goblins are most definitely the issue, because those goblins are showing up all the time, which thematically I think works for the game, because you're in this dungeon, there's swarms of goblins, they're coming all the time. With the traps, you really want to be able to disarm those. If you're running away from the goblins or you're running back to the goblins to eliminate them, you have that possibility that the only path that you can take is through that trap room. It rewards you to disarm the trap. That way you can go back through that room without that penalty and not having to make that check, or if you're me, getting damaged and knocked out.
And you get a benefit, right? Typically when you disarm a trap, you're going to either gain a loot card or some sort of reward for disarming it. One thing that's difficult about that, though, is it's really tempting to lead those traps without disarming them because you are timed. It seems like that torch moves so quickly and gets so close to that skull, and really the only way to get it moved back is by defeating one of the minions. When you defeat a minion, you get to move that torch back 6 spaces. So you're going to do that a number of times equal to all the minions that you have in the game. But that torch seems to move so fast where you feel like you're running out of time. And do you really want to spend one action? Because those are so precious, those actions. You need to get things explored. You need to get things defeated. Are you going to waste an action disarming a trap?
One thing I think is interesting that we should talk about too. Each player's unique ability, you have to balance out with equipment. Because I thought that was a brilliant touch. I think we alluded to before where Nathan was talking about lion set, the bear set, panther. I had the scarab set last time I played. A really cool system. When you get loot, you draw it, and then if you don't need it, you can't just give it to anybody, but you can discard it. So then if they were to draw loot, they could just draw what's available from the discard. If they're looking for a particular set, they can take that. Is system kind of popular in Diablo and some of the video games like that. The more pieces of that particular set you have, the stronger the pieces are, and the more cool abilities they get.
But no, you're right, Logan. The fact that you have starting equipment that's printed on your card, and when you gain new equipment, that gets covered up. And some of those abilities are pretty good, your starting abilities. In our game, Logan, I played Drunk Panda. So you have attribute stats, like Nathan said. You have your strength, which is going to be your melee dice. Agility, which will indicate how many dice you're going to roll for any agility checks or for your ranged attacks. Then you have your intellect, which will be used for spells or any intellect checks that you do. He had 1 die on each of those. Your max is 3. Most characters have a 3 in one thing. Well, he had a 1 in everything. But I could take a point of damage to add 2 dice to any skill I wanted.
Oh, that's really nice.
As a hand slot, I could heal 1 damage by spending 2 focus. So really cool abilities. I could choose to reduce 2 focus to get the dice, basically, or I could choose to take a damage to get the 2 dice. It just worked really well. But when you start getting items and those hand slots start filling up, you have to think about it. Oh my gosh, this is really a great ability. Am I willing to give that up for this, even if it's a set item? And did you explain the way the set items work?
The more you get of a particular set, the better they are. For example, when I had scarab items, 1 item gave you +1 intellect. But then if I had 2 items of that set, whenever I would attack, I had 1 shield for retaliation. If I had 3 items of the set, it would go up to 2. Each piece also had those things. So if I had the Sword of the Scarab, I could actually attack an enemy. And then because I had so many pieces of the set, I could cast a spell for free, so I'd have an additional action. Which is huge! Being able to potentially have multiple actions in a turn.
Having only played this twice, it seems like the wizards are crazy powerful in this. That being said, anybody can have spells. Any character can have up to 2 spells. Some of the spells are amazing. You had the same spell that Corey had when we played, and it was crazy good, where you could just walk into a room and light everything on fire in the room and do damage, which is great for goblins. They only have 1 health. You could just walk into a room full of goblins and fry all of them. crazy powerful at that point. Most of the ranged and melee attackers didn't have anything near that powerful, especially for the smaller monsters.
The cherry on top with that spell, you could charge into a room without using your movement. So you could use your movement speed, go into a room with the goblins, blow up, kill all the goblins, get all the equipment, get all the rewards, and then take your regular turn of moving and doing some free actions.
You mentioned free actions, so there's quite a few different free actions in the game, and you can do as many free actions as you want, as long as you didn't just get knocked out.
As long as you pay the piper, Nathan.
Yeah, I got knocked out a lot. Getting knocked out was kind of frustrating. Really, all you can do is stand up your miniature, heal 3 health, heal 5 focus. This barbarian, I was using focus like never. Didn't have any purpose for that, but the 3 health, and then we'd go fight the dragon, and the dragon would do 8 damage to me. I'd have 2 shield, still get torched. Those free actions for my character I didn't really get to take advantage of, but probably I guess because my focus was more go to the boss, attack, try to do as much damage as we could. In our game I had 4 of the bear set, so that allowed me to roll the 3 dice. It would allow me to add extra to my dice so that I was able to more effectively do damage, which was the only reason that you and I and Corey got as close as we did fighting that dragon, because of the extra damage that I could do.
Yeah, I was only doing like 1 damage. The bosses have a crazy defense. You really have to get some high numbers in order to really do any damage to the boss. This is a good segue to talk about how combat works. When you are attacking something, you're going to roll your attribute dice based on whatever type of weapon or attack you're doing. So if you're using melee, you're going to typically use your strength dice, ranged agility dice, and for spells, most of the time you're going to use your intellect. You're going to roll those dice along with the red monster die. You get to use 1 die for its number. However, if you happen to roll a 1 or a 2 on the other 2 dice that you're not going to use, they have a plus symbol next to them, and you can use those and add to whatever the value is of the die that you're choosing to keep. So for example, if I roll a 5, a 2, and a 1, I'm going to keep the 5, and I can add the 2, which will make it a 7, and I can add the 1, which will make it an 8. Goblins are typically pretty easy. They have fairly low defense of 4 or 5 typically. For a goblin, you just have to get 1 higher than whatever their defense is. They only have 1 health, so you do damage equal to the difference between their defense and your roll. If goblin has a defense of 5, I have to get a 6 in order to defeat the goblin. However, the bosses and the minions have higher defense values. Hopefully you've gotten enough loot at the beginning of the dungeon to actually be able to start doing damage and kill them off quickly, because they really do pack a punch like we talked about, and you can start losing health quickly, and then you get into that cycle, right, of getting knocked out, standing up, getting 1 hit, getting knocked out, and so on. Because when the monsters attack, they attack everyone that's in range. They don't just attack 1 hero. Everybody that can be attacked will get attacked. If you didn't kill the monster or a goblin or the boss on your attack roll, they're going to retaliate. And you're going to look at what their damage is on their retaliate skill, and then you add whatever number you rolled on that red die, and you compare that to your defense. Anything that surpasses your defense, you take that much damage. So having a good defense as far as when you're attacked can be super beneficial, so you don't take damage. But your damage doesn't mean anything when they attack you. You just take a flat amount of damage that's printed on the card whenever they activate.
Which is devastating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your shield blocks part of it, right?
Your shield will block only when they retaliate. Your defense doesn't even matter when they attack. Everyone takes that much damage. The only time your defense even matters is when they're retaliating against you.
I think I got knocked out by every minion. But that's part of the tactics of this dungeon game, too, is you want to make sure your melee person is in there fighting the minion. Hopefully prevent that minion from chasing after the other people so that that tank can be in there to absorb the attack. And hopefully the magic user and the ranged user, if you're using them, can do that damage from afar. We haven't tried it with a full melee group, and I don't know how that would work, but when we're talking about the minion's going to damage everybody in the room, that quickly knocks out everybody in the room.
Well, not only that, within our second playthrough, the boss had a range of 4. He would attack everyone within 4 spaces.
4 spaces and a line of sight.
And line of sight. They would always have to have line of sight. The other issue with the melee attackers, goblins are the same, but with minions and with the bosses, they're going to have different damage values for their retaliation strike. It's almost always larger amount of damage getting dealt to a melee attacker than it is to a ranged or a magic user.
Which thematically still works. You would
Right.
expect that.
Once you defeat all the minions, typically your torch is going to be pretty dang low on the track. But as soon as that last minion's defeated, it moves up 6. Once you find the lair and decide to go into it, you flip the card torch track to Act 2, and you start the torch over in the same spot that you started in the game. And every round it's going to once again move and have the same effects. Goblins are still going to spawn, all monsters are still going to attack. You just now have a little bit more time to wear that boss down, get them lured out to those altar locations so you can get the altar tokens put on them. And if need be, get them back to the lair so you can take advantage of those different bonuses that you can potentially have in the lair. Overall, I think it's a fun game. I think Act 2 goes a lot faster than Act 1 does.
I feel like it did too.
Fighting the monsters seemed like it went a lot faster. I know Corey had to leave once we started fighting the monster. I felt like it flew by. We still lost because we ran out of time.
But we were a turn away.
We were one turn away, and you don't have all those minions pushing that time back. Act 2 is definitely shorter, and I think it's meant to be by design. Our first play, we didn't play with the big dungeon mat. Our second play, we did. And I would highly recommend the dungeon mat. It's a lot easier to keep track of the size of the dungeon. So if you have a chance to buy the dungeon mat, that's one of the upgrades I would recommend getting. Because it can only go 7x7, and you want to make sure that you're not breaking the rules as far as that goes, because it does matter. Lots easier to keep track of when there's already a 7x7 grid that you're playing on with the dungeon mat. And it has a spot for all your decks of cards and everything else.
That's kind of how they get away from the Tiny Epic.
Yeah, for sure.
Because, yeah, we can sell you the mat. The separate, it's not going to fit in your box. Most of those mats are very much...
Just Epic.
Not Tiny Epic, just Epic. They enhance the game for sure. I would recommend getting the mat for this game. I did not get the mat when I backed it. Maybe something that I'll look into getting at a later time.
We also had the opportunity to play with the mini expansion, the potions expansion, with our second playthrough that we didn't play through the first time. And I really liked the potions. I thought they were fun.
It was interesting how awesome and terrible they are.
Whenever you gain a potion, it flips over and it has a negative effect that's going to happen to everyone. It's called peril, I believe. And something's going to happen. Everybody's going to lose health, going to lose focus, or something's going to happen. But then you have a potion. Different than the loot or the spell cards, when you gain a potion, you can immediately give it to any other player. They don't have to be in the same room as you. You can just pass it over to them and they have it in their inventory. The potions are just a one-time use, but they are pretty dang powerful.
One potion I held on to because I had to make a choice of spells or potion because you only have the choice of 2 total. It added 5 onto an intelligence check. And since I was doing battle with my intelligence modifier, I saved it for the boss so that way I could just do an additional 5 damage after overcoming the defense because the bosses have much stronger defense than the goblins and minions, which was huge at that point.
Just to give a perspective on that, goblins only have 1 health. The minions typically have 7 or 8, depending on the player count. The bosses are going to have a higher... So if we would have had 4 players, it would have been 32 health. An extra 5 damage on a boss, huge. And I know Doug could save one of his potions for the exact same thing, to be able to do he got an extra action. To be able to attack twice in one round, especially when you're the melee guy who dishes out a ton of damage.
Oh, that's huge.
It was amazing. Honestly, we weren't that close to running out of time, and I honestly believe it was because of the potions. The fact that we used them so strategically and so well, or at least you and Doug did, that really helped us beat the game and not feel like it was coming down to the wire. Maybe it makes it easier, I don't know. The peril makes it a little tougher when they first come out, but if you use them properly, they can be game changers.
Oh yeah, I think that peril was totally worth it in exchange for the amazing abilities. Awesome choice to do that. It was a balance of, do I draw more spell cards or keep my potion? And it was a tough choice sometimes because those abilities are pretty stinking awesome.
I do like the fact that any hero can use spell cards, but not every hero has the dice to really use the spell cards, so I like having those potions in there to fill those item slots for those people that aren't necessarily going to use spells.
So I guess to kind of round this up...
To bring the TED Talk to a conclusion?
Yeah, to wrap up this TED Talk, why we were discussing Tiny Epic Dungeons... This Tiny Epic game uses miniatures. And we've been talking about miniatures, and this is our final game in the miniatures segment. We're wrapping it up with this miniatures game. We talked about it that Scott Alms has done a great job with all these Tiny Epic games of making them so diverse and so unique to themselves. And I look forward to more Tiny Epic games. I'm totally on board with getting more Tiny Epic games. I think they're great. They don't take up a ton of space until you start trying to figure out where you're going to put your neoprene mats. Other than that, these Tiny Epics are great. I have a drawer that's dedicated specifically for Tiny Epic games, so I know where all of mine are. There's even a stuffed Gamelyn Knight in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
You can play the Gamelyn Knight in Tiny Epic Dungeons.
That would be appropriate, I would think. So.
Yeah. Prior to this, Tiny Epic Pirates was probably my favorite. I think this surpassed Tiny Epic Pirates. I really had fun with Tiny Epic Dungeons.
I think it was a great time, and I fully look forward to trying again and playing as a different character.
For sure. I did the range both times. I'd like to try as a Melee Gaera wizard next time.
Dave, did we get you excited for this? I know you haven't played it yet.
Yeah.
You're such a dork.
Wow. Wow.
Yes, I am excited. I love dungeon crawlers. I love miniatures. Really enjoyed the Tiny Epic games that I have played. I'm really looking forward to this one.
So that wraps up our discussion on Tiny Epic Dungeons. Let us know what's your favorite Tiny Epic game, or your favorite dungeon crawler that you have played, or a miniature game that you've played, as we're wrapping up our discussion on games with miniatures.
Until next time.
We'll see you diving into that Tiny Epic dungeon.
I hope you enjoyed this TED Talk brought to you by Meeple Nation.
As always, we want to thank you for listening.
Check out our website. We have all sorts of cool things there. Love those blogs. Get a deeper look into the writing side of Meeple Nation.
Join our Facebook group, Meeple Nation Off Air. I look forward to seeing you there.
Follow us on Twitter, @MeepleNation. We also have Instagram.
Under the same name. We also want to thank our sponsor, GameToppersLLC.com.
We love their product, and there's so much goodness out there.
And we also want to thank Braiding Detergent for our music. Did you just call it Diablo?
Yeah.
Wow.
Is that not how you say it?
It's Diablo or
What?
Diablo?
Diablo?
Not Diablo.
But it's dice, right?
Oh, Logan.
You've been hanging around with me.
Way too much.
Approaching the appropriate amount of time.
Thanks, Papa.
Did you explain the way the set items work?
Yeah, in Diablo, it's like where they...
Oh my gosh, man.
where the...
We don't get sued by TED Talks.